What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here at the stable. We have the majority of the wiring for the Scrapstang routed and laid out. As you can see, we have fuel sending unit, radio ignition gauge cluster, but we have no engine wiring. Any guesses on what we might be doing today? Don't ask me why there's a creeper on the engine we just rebuilt. Oh wait, you guys aren't supposed to see that yet. It's a secret for now, but our Patreons have seen it. Let's get it out of the way. There we go. Then we can get this guy into the Mustang. And because our intake has not arrived yet, we're just gonna lightly cover the valley here so we don't get no crud in there. All right, and we're off. All right, so the engine is now on the cherry picker. I don't really need to bolt on the transmission just yet, but I'm gonna do it anyway just so it's not sitting on only the engine mounts. Yeah. Down again she goes. Let's do this without breaking our back. Oh my. I didn't really think this through. Or maybe I did. All right, now we can pump it up. Without dropping it on ourselves, let's get this thing in there. Going to angle the transmission side down. It seems like every time I put this engine in, I struggle a little more every time. That is insanely loud. How is it so loud? It's comical how loud this thing is. Okay, the engine is back inside. That took way longer than I'd like to admit, but now you guys can get a more accurate idea on how far back we pushed the engine. You can see we have plenty of room for activities up front, as well as how low the engine now is compared to stock location. And you can also see the mean stance that the Scrapstang has. I wanted the rear to be the same height as the front, but the rear is sitting a little bit taller than the front, but I think I like it. Let me know what you guys think. Anyway, with the engine installed, we can now start routing and planning our attack for the engine wiring. But first, shout out to our friend Mike for keeping us caffeinated in this episode. So in order to make my life easier, I've made a rough diagram showing how I would want this engine wired. As you can see, there is not a whole lot going on in this engine bay. There's not a lot of connections, not a lot of wires to route. And if you guys remember, I had stated that I want this engine bay fairly clean and fairly neat. In order to keep everything neat, I am going to redesign the way that this engine bay was wired. So once again, this is our engine wiring diagram. Right here in this location is the fuse box that we installed in the previous video. And from that fuse box, there's only going to be about 4 wires going to the engine. One, this blue wire is going to read our oil pressure. This red wire is going to go straight to our coil. That's what's going to give the coil our power and our distributor its spark. And then this dotted wire also goes to our coil. That's going to be our tack wire. So that's going to tell us what RPM we're at. Then this green wire is going to go to our coolant temperature sensor. So that is what's going to be on the left side of the engine. As far as the right side of the engine, there is only going to be about 3 wires. One, this blue one is going to go to our starter. The red wire is going to go to our alternator, which is going to be the power. And the green one is going to our alternator as well. That's going to be the exciter wire. So this way there is only really 2 bundles of wire going to our engine. This one has a total of 4 wires. This one has a total of 3 wires. But some of you might be asking, what is this ignition hub? Well, this ignition hub is going to consist of 2 of these mega fuse boxes, as well as our starter solenoid, which is therefore going to be powered by our 12-volt battery that's going to be either in the trunk or the rear seat with an inline fuse. So let's try to simplify this. We're going to get 12 volts of power from the battery that's going to go through a fuse. That's going to hit our starter solenoid, which is therefore going to be split off into these mega fuses, One of the mega fuses is going to power our fuse box, while the other mega fuse goes to the alternator. Once again, this is a redesign on how it was from the factory. This ignition hub was basically over here in this corner, sitting right about there. But like I said, we want to eliminate most of the wires that are in the engine bay, so that has now been relocated under the dash. I'm thinking about putting it somewhere on the underside, probably about right here. And since that ignition hub is somewhere under the dash along this area, it has to come out somewhere along this side, but there are no holes nor passageways, so we have to figure out how we're going to do that. Whereas the driver's side that holds the fuse box does have a passage, which is sitting right about here. That hole is actually the factory wiring harness pass-through, so we are going to be using a factory hole. But for the ignition hub, once again, we don't have any passages, so we have to make one, which we pretty much have the freedom to make it wherever we would like. We could put a hole dead smack in the center here that will feed that starter and alternator wire. But what I'm thinking will look the cleanest is making a hole along this 90-degree bend, which serves us pretty good because it will give us a straight shot out into the starter location, and then from there we can route the wires to the alternator. There's also a couple ways we can do this. We can drill a hole and put a grommet, or we can drill a hole and use one of these relief tubes. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they're called, but we would have to drill a hole, and then this therefore gets sandwiched somewhere along the firewall, where we would just get this little thing sticking out, and we could also place this anywhere along the firewall. And then this will feed our wires outwards. These are pretty cool. I believe they would probably last longer than a regular grommet. And you can see how smooth the inside is, so you won't get any chafing on the wires. That's just an idea. We might have to use a grommet, we might not. Remember guys, we're in the planning stage. This is not how it was designed to be, so we're making our own blueprint here. Also, these things in the bus bars were sponsored by the Catman, so if you see them in the comments, give them a thumbs up. That's enough with planning though, let's actually start doing something. If you guys remember in the last video, we just bunched up the engine wiring harness and stuffed it under the dash. All right, I got the two bundles out. Both of these are going towards the front of the car, but only one is going towards the engine bay. This bundle right here powers the headlights, turn signals, parking lights, horn, electric fan, so we're not going to worry about this right now. This bundle right here, this is the one we want. This one is going to power our ignition coolant temperature sensor. It's going to give us our tach reading as well as our oil pressure, just like we saw in the diagram. With it in a bundle like this, it might look like a lot of wires, but it's only 4 wires. And once again, those 4 wires are going to go through that square hole that we talked about earlier. I undid the bundle for the 4 wires and I taped the ends together just to make it easier to fish through that square hole. All right, you can see all of our wires are routed through. You can also see how much extra wire they give you, which is really good because you have the freedom to do whatever routing diagram you want, or just keep it stuck. But now we can get a solid idea of what we have to do, because every single one of these wires are labeled. So this blue wire is going to go down to our oil pressure switch that is down here. So what I'm going to do is grab each wire and tape it to roughly where it's going to be cut. All right, so all of these wires are at their corresponding location. And once again, guys, all of these wires are labeled, so it takes all of the guesswork away from this wiring harness. Anyway, our blue wire goes through the harness and it splits off right at the front of the engine. Then it goes down to where this yellow tape is, and that's where our oil pressure sending unit is going to be. Then our green wire follows the same route and it ends right about here. This is where the coolant temperature sensor is going to be bolted in the car. Therefore, this is where the wires should end. Pink and white wires both go to the coil, which is going to be somewhere about right here, I think. So what does this all mean? Now we know how to wrap this wiring harness. So all of these are going to be wrapped together right about until here. That's where all of the wires tend to split off and go their own direction. So as we can see, all of the wires are bundled up everywhere until right about here, which is right about there. And from that split, that's where they go to their individual locations. All right, so we have the left side of the engine routed and done. Not done as in everything is connected and this engine is going to start up. You guys know what I mean. Now we get to start on the right side of the engine, which should be the fun part, and also the difficult part because we're redesigning how it's supposed to be. And we could also explain what this ignition hub is. The ignition hub consists of pretty much two things: our starter relay and a bus bar, or fuse blocks if you want to call them. These are going to hold a 150 amp or so mega fuse. All right, so here is an exploded view of said ignition hub. As you can see, we have our starter relay here, which is going to be mounted upside down. I say upside down because this thing is normally mounted right here on the fender apron. The battery post would get connected to this side, and the starter would be connected to this side. So it is normally mounted like this, but we are going to flip it upside down because we have since relocated this to this location. So the power now needs to go to the back of the car, whereas the starter wire needs to go to the front of the car. So once again, on the battery side of the starter solenoid, we're going to have obviously our battery, which is going to be located somewhere in the trunk area. That's going to hook up to this post, and also along with that is going to be hooked up the wire that goes to our fuse block or our bus bar. Once that power comes down from the starter solenoid, it's going to feed power to one of these fuse blocks, but there's going to be a jumper that'll be feeding both of the fuse blocks. Then there's going to be a fuse on each one of these, which is going to be about 150 amps probably. And then each one of these is going to feed something different. So one of these is going to feed the fuse box. If you guys remember earlier, we said that there's going to be a wire that feeds the fuse box from the ignition hub. And then the second fuse box is going to have a lead towards the alternator. And that's how it looks over here. We're going to have this red wire that goes towards the alternator. There is not a lot going on here. The most difficult part is just designing or deciding where you want the things to go. So I guess let's start deciding. And like shown in the diagram, our goal is to mount it somewhere in the passenger footwell. So not only do we have to decide on a location for this starter solenoid, but we also have to decide a location for this bus bar. And I know I keep switching the name between bus bar and fuse block. Bear with me, they're interchangeable. So since the battery is going to be sitting somewhere in the back seat or in the trunk, it's going to have to be routed through the quarter panel, under this door sill, and then through the underside of this A-pillar, through the inside of these, and then it'll have to pop up somewhere here. So therefore, I think I would like the starter solenoid to sit somewhere right here-ish, because the battery cable is gonna pop up through these holes and then get tied in right there. As far as the bus bar, I believe I would like it mounted somewhere right here. All right, so I could already see some complications with this setup because, like I said, the battery wire is going to come out through one of these holes and then go straight to this terminal. But then this terminal also has to power the bus bar, so therefore the wire will have to go over and do some kind of weird bend. And we want to try to simplify this so there's no weird bends or awkward angles for that wire to get kinked, bent, whatever. Okay, I think we found the solution. So once again, the battery cable is going to come from one of these holes and it's going to get hooked up to this terminal right here. Okay, let's try that again. So once again, there's going to be a battery cable that connects here. There's going to be another cable that links this to the bus bars, one of them, and then that's going to be jumped to the second one. And then one of these, probably this one, is going to be linked to the fuse box, and this one is going to go to the alternator. And then the terminal and on the bottom right here, which you can't see because of this magnet, this one's going to go to the starter. So therefore we have two wires going to the engine bay, the alternator, as well as the starter, which are going to be fed this way and through this 90-degree bend on the patch panel, which will come out roughly in this area right here. But this is something I probably should have done before installing the engine, because now the drill does not fit in the place that I want it to fit, nor does it properly fit on the bottom side because of this hump right here. So do we have to remove the whole engine to make one hole? 1 hour and 30 bucks later, we have a 90-degree bit, which I was going to need sooner or later, so here we are. The stepper bit bent the metal, So now, not only is it not a circle, it doesn't look as bad on camera, but now these little plugs are not going to sit flush. See if I can tap it back into place. All right, that actually did straighten it up better than I thought. All right, and that hole is finally done. It was a lot more painful than I thought it would be, but it's done. Now we can see how this is going to look. All right, I think that was worth the struggle because this plug looks pretty damn cool right here. It's not too obvious, it does look clean, and it'll head directly where we need it to go. This is what it looks like from the inside, and now you can see that from the plug, it'll go directly into the bus bars. Cool beans. So the plug that we just made sits somewhere about right here. So now we're going to route the starter wire as well as the alternator wire. Luckily, the Speedway harness includes both of the wires that we need. They do come with a fused link under this heat shrink. They are a bit thin. I might go with something different, but we're gonna use these for the routing purposes. I don't know, maybe we'll stay with them. Okay, so I'm going to fish both the alternator wire as well as the starter wire through here at the same time. All right, obviously this still needs to be zip tied and wrapped with that Tessa tape, but that's what it's going to look like. As you can see, it goes from the ignition hub out of this port. We have one wire dropping off right here where the starter would be, and then we have another wire that goes all the way up here where the alternator would be. Our alternator wire is going to connect to one of these bus bars about like this, and then the starter wire is going to connect to the starter solenoid on this terminal. During the filming of this video, we hit 10,000 subscribers, guys. As a way to say thank you to every single one of you, I have teamed up with a certain company. I'm not gonna give away too much details yet, but there will be a giveaway, so make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications on so you don't miss out. And remember guys, when it comes to giveaways on this channel, patrons get 5 times the entries. Speaking of patrons, we got a couple new members. Alrighty, let's give a warm welcome to our newest members. Once again, everybody signed up on our Patreon is going to automatically get 5 entries into the next and future giveaways. Well, the hardest part of the wiring process is now complete. It should be all smooth sailing from here. Should be. Drop a like if you guys are ready to hear this engine start. Well, it is now 9 p.m. and I am pretty beat, so I'm gonna call it a day. Thank you guys for 10,000 subscribers, and I will see you on the next one.